The dangerous situation is developing fast. So NYC was on alert when the former Hamas head called for protests around the world, including the United States. Things got really serious, guys. Check this out.
Bracing for chaos. The NYPD is ordering all personnel to report for duty Friday after a Hamas terrorist leader called for a day of anger and sacrifice,
telling Muslims to take to the streets across the world and protest against Israel.
Security in New York is already ramping up. There are heavily armed officers stationed at New York's Grand Central Station and the Port Authority bus terminal. Tomorrow, the streets will be teeming with uniformed officers. All uniformed members of the service in every rank have been called up, according to an NYPD memo. Be prepared for deployment.
There's been a lot of internet traffic that is giving concern to law enforcement authorities.
Now, I was reading through your comments in one of our previous videos, and one of you guys mentioned the possibility of getting drafted, like drafted into the military. Another one said that car manufacturers could get called up again to make weapons and medical equipment. Something I heard from military moms asking for prayers for their kids. 3 weeks to a month before the incident in Israel, we already had boots on the ground, people all around, ships nearby. So yeah, things are getting real. This honestly matches with what I was able to dig up. Now, apparently, the US intelligence community, they warned of a potential for violent days even before the initial Hamas attack. Now, according to the latest PBS poll, nearly 8 in 10 Americans fear that the war that erupted this past week between Israel and Hamas would actually lead to a broader war in the Middle East. It's just scary to think that this could easily reach the US in one way or another. You know what I mean? People are already starting to talk about closing our border immediately and indefinitely. You guys been hearing the same thing? So here's the deal, guys. Apparently, the US intelligence community produced at least 2 assessments based in part on intelligence provided by Israel, warning the Biden administration of an increased risk of Palestinian-Israeli conflict in the weeks ahead of the huge attack on southern Israel. The Hamas attack happened on October 7th, but one update as far back as September 28th, more than 1 week before it happened, warned, based on multiple streams of intelligence, that the terrorist group Hamas was poised to escalate rocket attacks across the border. Now, another one, an October 5th wire from the CIA warned generally of all of the increasing possibilities of violence by Hamas. Then on October 6th, the day before the attack, US officials circulated reporting from Israel indicating unusual activity by Hamas, indications that are now clear an attack was imminent. None of the American assessments really gave us the nitty-gritty details or the full picture of how intense and how brutal Hamas's operation was on October 7th. Plus, people were wondering if any of these US reports were actually shared with Israel, who usually provides a lot of the information for those assessments. But this isn't exactly new stuff, guys. It's pretty much par for the course when it comes to Hamas and Israel. People saw these reports and were like, yeah, we saw this coming. But these assessments were part of a series of high-level warnings given to the Biden administration by both US intelligence and the Middle Eastern allies over the past year. So it's making us wonder if both the United States and Israel were really tuned into the danger. Some senior official from an Arab country in the region mentioned that they did keep telling US and Israeli officials that Palestinian anger was reaching a dangerous pitch, but never listened every time that they warned them. There's also a Middle Eastern diplomat in DC who has been saying that their government has been sounding the alarm about the growing stash of Hamas weapons and the brewing Palestinian frustration. Now, according to them, the arms that exist in Gaza are beyond the imagination of anyone's thinking. The arms that exist in the West Bank via Hamas, they're becoming a real problem, and Hamas control of the West Bank is a real issue. Now, apparently this has been a hot topic in pretty much every meeting over the past year and a half for them. In February, the CIA director, Bill Burns, he even said that he was pretty much worried about things getting potentially out of hand and even more unstable and violent between Israelis and the Palestinians. However, all of these strategic warnings didn't do much to help US or Israeli officials see what was coming on October 7th. More than 1,000 Hamas fighters crossed the border into Israel in an operation that resulted in over 1,000 Israelis losing their lives. Plus, US and Israeli officials, following the intelligence, thought it would be just another round of minor violence from Hamas, maybe a bit of a rocket fire that the Iron Dome could handle. But it looks like they were way wrong. It's just a crazy world out there, guys, with all these different threats. So guys, remember, stay vigilant, stay safe, keep those prayers coming. Staying prepared and informed is definitely key too. We're all about financial freedom here on the channel, and part of that is ensuring our family's safety. Am I right? So don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you're always in the loop with the breaking news updates. And hey guys, if you really want to support the work that we're doing here on the channel, give that like button a little bit of love and tell your friends and family about this channel. It means the world to me. I appreciate you guys. Now, another possible reason that Israel and our own government were caught unaware of this potential problem, it's probably Hamas likely hiding the planning of the operation through an old-fashioned counterintelligence measure, like conducting planning meetings in person and staying off digital communications that Israelis can easily track. But really, US officials and Israel had become complacent about the threat that Hamas posed and failed to recognize the significant signs that the group was planning for a large-scale operation. For example, Israel officials failed to recognize routine Hamas training exercises as a sign that the group was preparing an imminent attack. The militants trained for the onslaught in at least 6 sites across Gaza, including at least one site less than a mile from Israel's border. Now, apparently, there were numerous indicators of a change in posture generally by Hamas, and then pivoting both in public rhetoric and posture more towards violence and attacks generally. Case in point, the recent call by former Hamas leader Khaled Marshall for others to deliver a message through the squares and the streets, a message of anger that they are with Palestine. So Marshall mentioned the concept of jihad, and some outlets reported that he had urged a global jihad. Now, that's scary, especially considering how jihad is a term that has been widely used by the group and other Islamist militants in the context of holy war. Now, what did he mean exactly? Because as you guys saw in the clip earlier, the army took it pretty seriously. Well, jihad does not always refer to armed struggle, although it is widely used in the context of militant groups, including Hamas and its fellow Palestinian militant group named Islamic Jihad, which, by the way, they were also part of the attack on Israel. But even if the term jihad can be used in other contexts than to refer to a holy war, Hamas has always been very clear about its aims and the means that it believes are necessary to achieve them. Hamas's character, updated in 2017, says that there shall be no recognition of Israel referred to as the Zionist entity, and that it seeks the complete liberation of Palestine from the river to the sea, meaning that all of Israel and not only the West Bank, Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem. It underlines that armed resistance is at the heart of this struggle. For them, resistance and jihad for the liberation of Palestine will remain a legitimate right, a duty, and an honor for all the sons and daughters of our people and of Ummah. That's them referring to the community of Muslims. But Americans are seriously worried about this. And like I mentioned earlier, nearly 8 in 10 Americans fear that the war that erupted this past week in Israel and Hamas will lead to a broader war in the Middle East. That's according to the latest PBS NewsHour NPR Marist poll. 7 in 10 U.S. adults are saying that they are closely following what is happening. And get this, guys, the anxiety about further escalations is shared across political affiliation, geography, gender, race, income, education, and age. I mean, it was definitely scary. This was probably the biggest Hamas incursion into Israel. They fired thousands of rockets and sent fighters past Israel's blockade of Gaza to launch deadly attacks on several communities and take scores of hostages. The combined death toll from both the surprise assault as well as Israel's bombardment of Gaza is, in response, it has risen to at least 2,800 lives. Now, so far, at least 27 Americans have been identified among the dead, with 14 more unaccounted for. And things are definitely escalating too. Israel ordered 1.1 million Palestinians in North Gaza to evacuate in 24 hours, despite a warning from the United Nations that the short deadline could be a total disaster. The evacuation orders were for Israel's anticipated ground invasion against Hamas. And in recent days, Israel cut off food, water, and electricity to the area that's under siege, where more than 2 million predominantly Palestinian residents have ruled since 2007 by Hamas. So yeah, we're pretty much in uncharted territory as far as this Israel-Palestine conflict goes, guys. Neighboring countries are also getting into it. Turkey called Israel's response a massacre, and Iran also warned that war could spread to other fronts. Officials are getting concerned about how this could possibly lead to a broader conflict, possibly involving the US as well. So President Biden had to reiterate the fact that the overwhelming majority of Palestinians have nothing to do with Hamas and Hamas's appalling attacks, and they're suffering as a result as well. Following the October 7th attacks, The US, India, and several other nations in Europe have voiced support for Israel in the conflict. That official stance also reflects a majority opinion among Americans. Roughly 2/3, 65%, say that the US should publicly support Israel, with backing from a majority of Democrats, Republicans, and independents. Now, at the same time, 8% of Americans say the nation should publicly criticize Israel. Interesting. Meanwhile, you got 23% of Americans saying that the United States should remain silent and pretty much do nothing, including 32% of people who are not white and 37% of adults under the age of 45. So yeah, you still have this large mainstream American political view that's bipartisan that it's important to support Israel. You also have an isolationist view that's growing, which was less widespread even a few years ago. In general, the American public has less confidence that support for Israel will bring greater security to the Middle East. Overall, 53% of Americans said that they think U.S. support for Israel will make the region safer. Now, at the same time, though, 41% said that they think that it may actually make the Middle East more dangerous. Now, as far as President Biden's leadership during the whole Israel-Hamas crisis, roughly half of Americans, 52%, do not support Biden's handling of the war between Israel and Hamas. Now, that includes 80% of Republicans and 58% of independents. Meanwhile, 44% of Americans support how President Biden has managed the crisis so far, including 77% of Democrats. When asked in general about Biden's performance as a president, Americans overall are twice as likely to strongly disapprove than to strongly approve. But what about you guys? What do you think about how Biden has been handling this Middle Eastern conflict? Let me hear your thoughts in the comment section down below.